do you say?
What do you say to somebody that only has 30 days to live? What do you say?
I like to start off the stage, also because I like to touch some people, which kind of disturbs them, but it welcomes them at the same time. To break that wall, I mean, there doesn't have to be a divide. I do like to go out into the audience. It's a kind of a more rock thing as well, although I think that what I'm doing is a very intimate performance. And I think it's interesting, and sometimes I just want to get as close to someone, for whatever reason. Sometimes it could just be to spread the fear. Sometimes it could be to spread the warmth. So, there's no telling. At 12, I started writing in my journals, mostly horrible poetry about murdering my parents. It was absolutely atrocious. However, I knew, because I was inspired by literature, first and foremost, by Henry Miller, Hubert Selby, Genet de Sade, that writing, that telling the truth about my reality was what I had to do. I felt even at 12 that it was a duty or a calling that I had. So as soon as I could, I went with my notebooks of terrible poetry to New York. And at 17, Lenny Kaye of the Patti Smith group was the only one who would give me any ear. The rest would run screaming. Richard Hell, David Byrne, they were terrified of me. And I thought I was just going to go there and there wasn't spoken word yet. It was after Beat, it was after Lenny Bruce, and it was before really spoken word. There was poetry, but, so I thought I would go and the word had to come out. But the easiest way to do that in 77 was to put, well, in my case, some atrocious fascist din behind it. And even though my first group, Teenage Jesus, which I wrote the music and played the guitar and taught I taught the drummer how to play a drum. Half the music was instrumental, but the words were most important. And that's really how it began. And of course I was inspired by music as well, but as a contrarian, a born contrarian, whatever had inspired me at that time, which would have been, for instance, Iggy Pop and the Stooges, the Velvet Underground, Patti Smith, was just too traditional a format for me to house my venomous rage in. So whatever had inspired me, it was just natural for me to contradict, to try to create a sound that would illustrate the sound of my pain, of my rage, of my hatred, of my anger, and yes, I'm so mellow now, it did only take me about 4 decades. That's all right.
Lately there's also been some kind of there was the No Wave book that Thurston Moore wrote.
I like to call it the love letter to myself, but yes, you're right. Thurston did write a love letter in the form of a book to the No Wave movement.
And there's been concerts, or festivals and so on, kind of reviving this whole. What's your take on that now?
Well, No Wave was a movement that can be defined specifically by what it is not. It's basically not melodic. It's not user-friendly. It doesn't sound like if you say jazz is very diverse. It's still a generic term. But if you say punk or country or blues, you know that within a parameter of this kind of general definition, you know what the sound is. If I say the blues, you know what the blues sounds like. But if you say no wave, other than the fact that it's often irritating, dissident, it doesn't sound like itself. And that was a pretty interesting period in music because mainly no wave to me is the sound of personal insanity, where like punk rock might be the sound of political insanity. A lot of punk rock was very political. No wave was not political. It's just the sound of personal angst, the inability to continue going one step further without making some kind of atrocious din as protest against just reality itself. And it only took 30 years, and I always tell people, well, maybe you'll catch on to what I did in '82 next year, it doesn't matter. I just do what I do. I do what I do to represent my own personal hysteria at the moment, and also the social hysteria as my work started becoming very political under Ronald Reagan.
We're just dust and shadow. We're just dust and shadow. How do you explain that death is just the shadow? Death is just the shadow. Death is just the shadow that follows the body. Death is just the shadow that follows the body.
What do you say?
What do you say to somebody that only has 30 hours to live? What can you say? What do you say to somebody that only has 30 hours to live? What can you fucking say? That I won't forget. I won't forget. I won't forget. I won't forget you. I won't forget. I won't forget you. I won't forget. Do you remember? Do you remember? Do you remember? Do you remember how much beauty we possessed? Do you remember remember how much beauty we possessed? It almost fucking killed us, right? That we wanted it all. Do you remember we wanted it all? I mean, we went for it, right? We went for it. I mean, we fought the good fight. We fought the good fight. We knew that every day was a battle. We fought till the bitter end. We knew that you had to fight. We were not afraid to fight. We knew that you had to fight. There wasn't a fucking day that we weren't in battle mode. We knew who the enemy was. You gotta know who the enemy is. You have to know who the enemy is, because in the end, the enemy is always going to win. In the end, the enemy is always going to win, because the enemy is death. And in the end, death will always win. I mean, it's just been one long fucking death trip, right? I mean, it's just a battle to the bitter end. You've got to fight against the killing machine. You've got to fight against the merchants of death. You've got to fight for your life. You have got to fight. You have got to fight for your life. You have got to fight to control your death. You have got to fight for your life. I mean, they poisoned everything, right? They poisoned everything. They poisoned the water. They poisoned the air. The food is poison. They fucking poison. We're just dust and shadow. We're just dust and shadow. Death is just the shadow. Death is just the shadow that follows the body. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. You're free. Don't be afraid. I'm right here. I'm right here. Take my hand. You can now go into the light. You can go into the night. You can go into the light. You can go into the night. You can go into the light. You're going to be free. You're going to be like a dark night, just riding off into the endless night, into the endless light. Don't fear the night. Don't fear the night. Don't fear. Embrace it. Embrace the endless, deep, black velvet caress. And if you want to go into the light, go into the fucking light, because I won't forget. I won't forget. I won't forget. And this is your story, and you'll be wearing a crown of invisibility, because yours is the power and the glory. Yours is the power and the glory.
When people cry, I'm very happy, because I think the release is good. I'm not there to, I'm not bullying them into tears, but some people said that they were crying, and I think that's good. I'm crying as well. I always laugh and cry the most at my own jokes, being my #1 fan as I am.